The steal by Iverson, posting in. He wins it. He won the game. Embiid there to say absolutely no. Three from Scott. Yeah, do you love this game?
Yes, it is the Sixers Talk podcast with you once again. So glad you could join us. Danny Pommells and Noah Levick from NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com, Sixers writer. Hey, we're brought to you by Wilmington University, WilMU Works, and Sixers fans, they did it. This is the result that you had been hoping for ever since the trade went down and Daryl Morey and Doc Rivers and Seth Curry and all these guys showed up here. You were hoping that they would get the number one seed. You were hoping that they would be delivered to the postseason healthy, and all that has happened as the path, Noah Levick, is as easy as it has probably been in 20 years, as the Sixers are the number one seed for the first time since the Allen Iverson era. Here are things breaking the way the Sixers wanted them to. As a Sixers fan, you couldn't ask for much else. Am I right?
Absolutely, yeah. Especially the health, in the context of how much bad luck they've had there in recent seasons. Notably, Ben Simmons, the season-ending left knee injury last year. And I think they've exceeded expectations. I don't think many folks thought that they would be the best team in the conference or that all these new additions would gel so quickly. But here they are. And as you noted, the road has broken very well for them. The Miami Heat, who obviously made the Sixers look rather bad recently, ended up finishing sixth in the Eastern Conference. So they would have a very, very difficult path to the Eastern Conference Finals, and that's the earliest they could meet the Sixers. And then for the Sixers, they will play whichever team winds up as the eighth seed in this play-in tournament. And then their second round opponent will be either the Knicks or the Hawks. And I think whoever it is, assuming the Sixers get there, they will be strongly favored to win that series.
We'll delve deeper into that playoff matchup, playoff history of the past, because, hey, guys, it's been 2 years since there's been a game at the Wells Fargo Center for the 76ers in the playoffs. And we'll also talk a little bit of this 50-40-90 discussion that we've been talking about throughout the season on the podcast with Tobias Harris and how things played out a bit across the league and just the rarefied air that record is. But nonetheless, let's stay here in the present. And, we talk about the way everything is breaking for the Sixers. I mean, they got the best winning percentage of any starting five in the league. They have the full starting lineup healthy, as I mentioned, a week of practice with that starting lineup here, which, they hadn't had all season with Doc Rivers using the shoot-arounds as a de facto practice. So we'll be interested to see what comes out of that. And on top of all that, the fans are coming back, Noah. Here we are, trudging through this season. The Sixers did their part in getting the number one seed, and now it's the fans' chance to do their part and show up in droves, and they will be at full capacity at the Wells Fargo Center by like the second week of June. So all of a sudden, all the momentum is pointing toward the Sixers in a way that maybe some people wouldn't have expected. I didn't anticipate it all coming together this quickly and so fast. I mean, did you see it all coming together that way?
No, I mean, I think heading into the season, I thought probably a realistic expectation was that they would be a pretty good team and that the Seth Curry and Danny Green acquisitions would work well. But I thought maybe something around the third seed would be reasonable to expect for them to be the best team in the Eastern Conference. Just not something many folks saw coming. And the home court advantage is very significant for this team, as we know, and the addition of fans you expect will be another boost. I mean, they've lost 9 games at Wells Fargo Center over the last 2 seasons. And as Joel Embiid recently mentioned, probably for 4 or 5 of those games, you had a Sixers star or two not able to suit up. Like when this team is healthy and plays at Wells Fargo Center, it seems to have this borderline magical impact where they just get this 10, 15 point boost. And inevitably when the game is close, you feel that they're probably going to come out on top. So yeah, 50% capacity for the first round of the playoffs, which will be, I think, a dramatic change. Even with 4,000-ish fans, it's been very, very loud in there, and I'm sure we're going to feel that increase, and it is going to have an impact on the games, even if, that's impossible to quantify. And then full capacity. It's hard to imagine. We've been.
Yeah, it is hard to imagine, especially when you see the setup with how protracted and spread out the players and coaches are there, where typically there are seats for fans to sit in. I don't know how the arrangement's going to change or what have you, but it is going to be a whole different ball game, man.
Seriously, I think we've just all gotten used to things are different now because we've been living in a pandemic, and we've had distancing and mask wearing. And fortunately, it seems like a lot of indicators are pointing in the right direction, and the authorities feel that this is a safe step to take. And I think it's almost going to be shocking for some of these players, just the dramatic increase in the volume. And I think many probably got used to playing in empty arenas, and it sort of has that pickup game feel, and this is going to be anything but that. It's hard to imagine how intense it is going to be, and fans have been waiting for this for a very, very long time. Of course, no playoff games last year, as you mentioned, and this team is much better than last year's team. So there's a lot of reason to be enthusiastic about this group.
Particularly, we talked about the cautious optimism some people might have, particularly with who the Sixers have played, about what players have been available on opposing teams, or even what players were available when the Sixers played some of these marquee teams. We can draw upon the Phoenix game and the Utah game as measuring sticks, even if you want to go back as far as the Lakers game as measuring sticks for what this team is capable of against full-fledged rosters. Of course, the Lakers are in the play-in, but that's basically based upon injuries mostly. But for all intents and purposes, though, this is what fans wanted, and it's time to get excited and to ratchet things up a bit. I'm sure it'll all naturally come together after this kind of week bye that their Sixers are enjoying is over. And we'll delve into just how the play-in works out in relation to the Sixers and potential matchups and what have you. And like I said, Sixers series pass, because it has been a while since we've had playoff basketball at the Wells Fargo Center. I just want to dig a little deeper, and I'll use this as a transition point to go into our second topic. But one of the things the Sixers have as they're going into the postseason, which they haven't had in the past, is a capable backup for Joel Embiid. Now, we saw Joel rocking the gigantic chain on the sidelines, which was just the swag moment that we all have been waiting for and enjoy with this guy. He just exudes, Joel Embiidness all the time. But Dwight Howard brings his own energy, fervor, excitement. You see him with the Frosty Freeze-Out stuff at the very least, but I mean, his impact on the court is what we really love and enjoy. Just going into the postseason, having that commodity is a big plus for this team, particularly with the Greg Monroes and what have you of the past that haven't been able to give Joel Embiid a breather. That, even though his minutes are ratcheted up, there's going to be time where he needs to hit the sideline for a minute. Is that something that you're looking at as a feather in their cap, the impact of Dwight Howard on this postseason?
Potentially. I think Dwight Howard may be like the most interesting person on this team. Just this career that's, winded in a million different directions, and he has probably a checkered past in terms of how he's been perceived in locker rooms and rubbing some folks the wrong way. And then, these last 2 years, it seems every teammate that interacts with him has had nothing but incredible things to say. And he perhaps is at a point in his career where he still has that energy and the massive smile and the excitement.
Work ethic.
The work ethic. But, he also has the veteran kind of wisdom on his side now, just because he's made a lot of mistakes. And to his credit, he seems to have learned from them and understands that, sacrifice is important, and it's a big component of winning basketball teams. As far as the on-court stuff, I agree with you that he's more reliable than Greg Monroe, but I do still have some questions there, just in terms of his ability to play against, stretch fives, more athletic fives. It appears Doc Rivers has recognized that his pairing with Ben Simmons has been poor this year, and that's likely not viable in the playoffs. But if the Sixers, do need to pair that duo in the playoffs, are they able to hold their own, or is Dwight's lack of shooting an issue? So I think there are a ton of questions with him on the court. And then, look, he became the first, and I think ended up being the only player in the league this year suspended for 16 technical fouls. So you do wonder if his tendency to get in these extracurricular spats will be an issue in the postseason, and whether he will be able to avoid trouble, because it seems like part of it is just trouble finds him. He has this reputation, and he's officiated perhaps harshly here and there, because folks know that he likes to be an instigator, but also, he's 35 years old and he should know better in some of these instances. So I'm very curious to see whether that's a problem in the playoffs, because you can't afford to be ejected from a game, in the postseason. You can't afford to be suspended. It's just not, the Sixers don't have that margin for error in all likelihood if they're playing a formidable opponent like the Nets in an Eastern Conference Finals series. So Dwight Howard, what a fascinating guy, what an interesting player, and certainly a well-credentialed backup center. Absolutely.
I'm curious. I was surprised you took that road with Dwight being so middle of the road, and what we fans might expect from him and what he might be able to give them in the postseason. Do you think some of that might be mitigated by the fact that they are at home? They do have the home court advantage. So maybe some of those in between calls, if we just want to go to the Miami game, which also brings up the other point of, will Joel get the benefit of a lot of those calls in the postseason that he's enjoyed in the regular season to be able to lead the league in free throw attempts and whatnot? Do you feel like the Whites, that edgy nature of kind of playing right on the dividing line of, getting the calls his way or going against him, do you think that'll be mitigated by the home court advantage stuff? And do you think Joel might benefit from, getting the benefit of the whistle as well at home?
I would say perhaps there are one or two situations where it's on the border, and Dwight Howard will not get the benefit of the doubt on the road, and perhaps he does at home. Like, what comes to mind for me, I think it was back-to-back ejections that he got in Los Angeles. Like, maybe the fact that he didn't have the home crowd behind him subconsciously does have some influence on the refereeing. I would be reluctant to say that there's any.
He did block Montrezl Harrell's dunk right before that, though, so he was a little bitter. But that was a funny instance for you to bring up. But go ahead.
Yeah, that was an interesting road trip for him. So I personally would be reluctant to say that there's a huge influence one way or the other there. I think a lot of it's just on his shoulders. Like, does he put himself in situations where the officials, might penalize him, or does he not? And it's still an open question. With Embiid, I mean, he's very successful at drawing free throws, whether it's at home or on the road. I thought it was funny. In one of these recent games, I guess it was maybe the Friday game versus Orlando, you almost got the sense that he drew early free throws, and then the Magic bench was unhappy about it, and Orlando was clearly a much worse team than the Sixers, and it seemed like the officials almost had a little bit of sympathy toward the Magic, and the whistle didn't go his way. That obviously won't be in the case in the playoffs. The Sixers will be facing opponents who are on their level or close to it. And my guess is he will be very good at drawing free throws. He's shown the ability to do it regardless of the opposition, and it's an important and valuable skill that he's shown throughout the season.
And then with Dwight, the point you brought up about him facing stretch fives and being able to guard, out toward the perimeter and guard successfully without fouling, that's something you probably wouldn't be as worried about until the conference finals. That's more what you're focusing on, right? I
guess so. I think, in all,
because you wouldn't really run into that much of an issue with the first or second round opponents.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of, there are for potential first.
Yeah, right.
Opponents.
Obviously, the playing tournament and
Yeah, they
whoever
have
wins the games and what have
their
you.
own strengths and weaknesses, their own personnel, whatever. I think in general, though, it's probably fair to say that there's not much that should deeply concern the Sixers in either of their potential first or second round matchups.
Whether it's Dwight or whoever.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
they can't take anyone lightly. All of these teams, will have reached where they are for a reason and have very good players, but the Sixers are superior and should take care of business, in my view.
Yeah, great point. Let's delve into the whole playoff format, dig in a little bit of history and whatnot after we take this quick timeout.
Start college, build skills, and complete your degree with Wilmington University. 100% online options and affordable tuition makes WilMU work for you. Learn more at wilmu.edu.
Yeah, play-in tournament is what's next for the NBA and will determine who the Sixers play in the first round. So the 18th to the 21st is the play-in tournament, starting with the Eastern Conference on the 18th. So you got the Hornets and Pacers that Tuesday at 6:30, and then the Wizards and the Celtics afterward at 9. And then they play the winner of game 1, loser of game 2 Thursday to determine the 8th seed. So the Sixers will know after Thursday night, Friday morning, what have you, whenever, they go into practice that Friday, they will know who they're playing. I'm hoping it's the Hornets. I think that'll be really exciting. A lot of people want the Celtics for a little payback, but I'm good with either. Real quick, any perspective there? I know we talked about this previously, but have your thoughts changed?
Not a ton. Yeah, I would just, from a basketball fan standpoint, love to see the Hornets. I think that would be a ton of fun. Washington's hot. I don't expect the Sixers to lose their first round series regardless of the opponent, but I could see Bradley Beal stealing a game or two in the first round if that's ultimately the Sixers' opponent. And then you do have to remember the Sixers lost their last game against Indiana and played a very poor second half offensively. So Indiana would at least have a little bit of confidence should they match up against the Sixers, especially since it would be coming off the back of a couple, consecutive play-in wins. So yeah, I'm excited to watch that. And it is true that, and Doc Rivers mentioned this last night, that you could consider it a slight disadvantage that the Sixers will be the last Eastern Conference team to know their opponent. But Ben Simmons said, if we're in this position, we shouldn't be scared of anyone. And I don't think that's an especially brash thing to say. I think that's an accurate perspective. They, should take these opponents seriously and obviously will scout them all tightly, but they shouldn't be scared of whoever this opponent ends up being.
There's something to be said for sure to Doc Rivers' point, which he mentioned, the fact that the Sixers have a week off and this other team will already have played playoff basketball, coming into the matchup. But yeah, it's not going to be a heavy lift for the Sixers. But as a fan, you're probably hoping this is a quick and easy series, fun, but a sweep, and then move on to the next round. And hopefully something similar happens there, depending on who wins. But so that's the setup for the Sixers. The Western Conference plays on the Wednesday and the Friday, the Eastern Conference Tuesday to Thursday. And then you get the first round opponents there for the 1 and 2 seeds. So moving forward, the Sixers, here they are in the catbird seat, a week off, some time to get their legs back under them with all that they've been through this season and practice, and Doc Rivers to get some sets together, hopefully tighten up the bench, get the rotations right, and just really just hone in on what this is. I mean, the last time this team was fully healthy, bro, it ended up with the Kawhi shot. So there's definitely a lot of those players in the sentiment. Danny Green obviously being on the other side of that, which is funny as I don't know what, but obviously Joel and Ben, that still lingers with them, Tobias, what have you. So that's something that they're obviously in the back of their minds for sure of trying to, remove that. But this is the easiest, best path they've had in so long, and fans should be excited about that. But if we go back to that season of the Kawhi shot, Noah, the Brooklyn series in that first round was a lot of fun, man. And one of the things that I think back on is I don't know if people remember when they had that fight in Brooklyn under the basket and that spilled into the stands. And John Clark got toppled over because he was sitting in a chair behind. So that was like a meme in and of itself. Rex Chapman got a hold of it. It was great, man.
And he was I think he still got it on film.
Right. The whole thing. Yeah. Oh, this is John Clark, of course. Like he probably did a somersault still holding his camera while he was filming it. But what a great series. I hate to bring him up, but it seems that he's always got a quote that people like to run with. But the Jared Dudley series, quote unquote, where he criticized Ben as being really a transition guy and not a half-court player, and that erupted into what it did. And Ben criticized the fans and the whole bit. But what do you remember about that series? No.
Yeah, I got some quick notes to run through. Yeah, so game one, the Sixers were
game booed. One, South Philly.
They were booed very heavily.
Right.
Especially, I remember clearly he missed a pair of free throws in the second half, and I don't know if I've heard boos that loud in a long time. And I think a lot of that was just the expectations were very high after, adding Jimmy Butler and everything. And then Ben Simmons says, if you're going to boo, stay on that side. And there was a lot of folks, who didn't find that comment endearing, from Ben Simmons. Then he's great in game two, triple double. The Sixers have an incredible third quarter run. And I remember Jimmy Butler said Brett Brown cussed them out in the locker room at halftime, and he loved that. He loved kind of the unvarnished language and just Brett telling it like it was, that the Sixers needed to be better at defending threes, and they were great after halftime. Game three was where it was a shoot around. We had the Ben Simmons comment. He just brushed off the Jared Dudley criticism, said that's coming from Jared Dudley. Come on. Joel Embiid was a late scratch. Greg Monroe, who we already talked about, started. And Ben Simmons was incredible all around in that game. JJ Redick and Tobias Harris were also great, basically making every three-point shot they took. And the Sixers got a win without Joel Embiid. Then game four was the one where there was the scrap, and Dudley basically got Jimmy Butler ejected from the game, which obviously favored Brooklyn, but Joel Embiid carried the Sixers, kept them close, and Mike Scott had his, crowning achievement as a Sixer, which was that game-winning three from the left corner. And I think that basically took the life out of Brooklyn. I mean, that was an epic game, game four. I don't know.
Yes.
If, Joel Embiid, I don't know if before this season, whether he's ever played a better game than he did in game four. It was just incredible on both ends, despite not being in great shape and, his knee being an issue and, clearly not being 100% physically, but just gave maximum effort, and you saw his brilliance on both ends of the floor. And then game five, I think the Sixers basically, took care of business within the first 5 minutes. They took like a 22-point first quarter lead or something like that.
Did Ben cup his ear? Is that the cup ear game? Is that...
Might have been. I want to say that might have been game two. Since
the game after the criticism, right?
Yeah, he's kind of playing off like, hey, like I'm still one of your guys. Like you can support me. Game five was just they looked. Brooklyn was toast, and the Sixers knew that and took advantage. And the Nets could barely score in the first quarter. But what a series! I mean, I can't imagine a 5-game series with
a gentleman's sweep, but yet super intense.
It's just so intense, and Brooklyn was very competitive with the exception of game five. And, quite a series to remember. And it's the last series the Sixers have won. And I think it's also a reminder that though we talk about how they should be favored, you never know exactly what's going to happen in the playoffs. And there's a ton of unpredictability, and there tends to be physicality and drama and little mini storylines that bubble up over the course of a series, and you just have to keep a level head and adjust to it and be ready for whatever hits you.
Miami series, a great example of that, because we got Udonis Haslem getting ejected, Dwight Howard getting technicals, Jimmy Butler almost perfect from the field to start the game. Like, it was just had that playoff feel to it. And just to go back before we delve into Miami, but like go back to what you were saying about Brooklyn, just like look how far we've come in 2 years, bro. Like, Brooklyn is a completely different team. The narrative with the Sixers was heavily, a lot about Joel's diet and his health, and that was a little, him coming with the Shake Shack, I think, or something like that. There was like a photo of him like after the game, like getting some food or something like that was like the criticisms at that time. Like all of that is dissipated. Like his focus and his leadership and all, like that is the narrative in every way, shape, or form. Like, even if you fast forward a bit to the Toronto series when he was a game time decision and had a stomach bug or whatever was going on with him, people were wondering what was up with him. But like that is, we're at the point we're rocking gigantic dookie chains on the sideline, just ropes bigger than 50-pound chains, quote unquote, on the sideline. But I think that for me, like, the Sixers and what they've become and what they've learned and how far they've grown also goes hand in hand with Doc Rivers. When I think about it, because of what he has to overcome from his, 3-1 debacle, and the Sixers, trying to overcome the Kawhi shot and, being swept by the Celtics, obviously not healthy, but they both have adversity that they're trying to overcome. And I hopefully it comes together in a way that, will just really, I don't know, change the history and landscape of the Philadelphia sports scene.
It's very possible that it will. And it's interesting because, as we mentioned earlier, I think heading into this year, if you told Sixers fans that they'd be the number 1 seed and that they'd be expected, honestly, to make the Eastern Conference Finals, everyone would have been thrilled with that. But now I would expect that there's probably a large chunk of the fan base who wouldn't be satisfied with just making the conference finals. I think bigger and better things are now seen as what this team should be accomplishing. So we'll see if they do it. And there is some uncertainty because of just the wildness that tends to occur in the playoffs, and also that this season has been so weird and there have been so many injuries and there have been so few games at full strength, and there are not a ton of quote unquote tests that the Sixers have really had in the regular season. And it's going to be test after test after test in the playoffs in all likelihood.
Start college, build skills, and complete your degree with Wilmington University. 100% online options and affordable tuition makes WilMU work for you. Learn more at wilmu.edu.
Yes, man. We're going to get out of here on the podcast, but I wanted to kind of nip in the bud and give a hat tip to Tobias Harris, snubbed from the All-Star game in some aspects. Obviously, he had credentials and they're the front-running team. So getting a third All-Star would have been great for the team and not unprecedented, but who do you take off was his story. But he also had this chase for the 50-40-90 club. And in 62 games, he finished up 51.2%, 39.4% from three, and then 89.2% from the free throw line. But a counterpart, adversary, a foe, Kyrie Irving, did make the 50-40-90 club in 54 games. He went 50.6, 40.2, 92.2 in 54 games. And some might say a guy like Kyrie doesn't care as much about that stat as maybe Tobias Harris, a guy who actually said that that's something he wanted to achieve. So hat tip to Kyrie and his talent and what he represents, probably one of the most talented players the NBA has ever seen. But with all that said, I'm just curious if, Tobias Harris's eliteness is being appreciated here. I mean, we're talking about a club that very few people have been in. Steve Nash, if you want to, you look at the elite of the elite. Steve Nash did it 4 times of the 54-90 club, although Steph Curry did it averaging 30 a game, shooting over almost 2,600 3-pointers, like, and also playing like 81 games and close to it. But there's levels to this award, and I'm just curious how, what do you kind of measure of appreciation do you put on something like this, or as a student of the game and someone who appreciates how players go about what they do? What do you feel? How do you feel about what Harris did or didn't accomplish, or the eliteness of the award, or being in that club, so to speak?
Yeah, I would say you do have to acknowledge that offense has been up across the league this year and has trended up since the days of Steve Nash and Reggie Miller, where they were a little more rare. You have more players these days who are flirting with 50, 40, 90. That said, it's still very difficult to do. And I think Tobias Harris deserves recognition for how much he's
twice now coming pretty darn close to it.
Yeah, and just especially after last year, where I think many were disappointed by the way he played and felt like he wasn't living up to his contract. And I think that's not the case anymore. I would say what I think might be underappreciated about him this season is he's improved in ways besides his shooting and his scoring. I think he's been better defensively. I think he's always looked pretty sturdy against interior players, but he continues to improve with his agility on the perimeter. And I think he's just been a very smart team defender, always seems to be in the right place in a way that maybe wasn't the case in years past, and is a big part of why the Sixers have one of the NBA's best defenses. And I think he's also been better as a passer this year. Before, I think in the pick and roll, opponents realized that most likely he was going to shoot the ball, and he didn't have great feel as a passer. And now I think his instincts with his passing are better. Even his touch seems to be improving a little bit with his passing. And those are significant areas of the game to get better for someone who is a veteran. And I think many people assumed kind of he is what he is. And he continues to evolve his game, and I think deserves credit for doing so this season. So I'm impressed that, he almost joins that club that is tough to be a part of. But I'm maybe even more impressed that he wasn't satisfied with just, okay, my job on this team is to score 20 points a game and to do so reasonably efficiently. He recognized there were other areas he could get better. And he's done that this season. So good on him for that. Since he's returned from this right knee injury where he missed 3 games, his numbers have trended down. And I think you do wonder, whether he can kind of return to his best form in the playoffs. So we shall see on that. But zooming out and looking at the season as a whole, definitely deserves a tip of the hat for coming close to the 50, 40, 90. And then also, in my mind, the improvement in some other key areas.
And we will have to say he's in his prime at this point with these numbers we're talking about. Obviously, there's other loftier goals he wants to achieve, like the All-Star game, or to actually reach the 50, 40, 90 club. But how many more years would you think he would be at this type of clip? Would you think maybe 3 more years, 4 or 5 at this clip, at this specific clip?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say in the back of my mind is the fact that he was a durable Ironman player for quite a few years, and
sure,
there's a lot of minutes on his body, and you do wonder if that catches up to him. So I think that's kind of an X factor and something where you just can't predict it. Everyone's body is different as far as how much wear and tear they're able to take. Mm-hmm. I do know he's very diligent about taking care of himself. And he will do everything within his power to be good for a long time. If health is not an issue, yeah, I think probably 3, 4, 5 more seasons of prime Tobias Harris is something you could expect. and he's also someone too who's, I think, good at kind of using his body and shielding off defenders. And maybe if he does lose a little of his athletic burst, it's not something that will hurt him a ton. He won't be able to isolate and take guys off the dribble in the same way, but almost a little Carmelo Anthony-esque, right? In that ability to just get him the ball in the mid post. He backs the guy down and he does his thing and turnaround jumper, shoots over them. And that's something that should be there at 35, 36 years old. So his game perhaps will age well in that respect. Defensively, I think that's where you tend to see a little bit of slippage in players. But yeah, the health is a question mark. But I think provided that everything's okay on that front, he should be in his prime for the remainder of this 5-year, $180 million contract, which is part of the reason they gave him the deal, of course.
Yeah, Harris approaching his 10th NBA season. Hey, he's only 28 years old, soon to be 29. But how I asked the question because obviously Ben and Joel approaching their primes. How long will he be able to meet them at that level? And Noah with a great poor man's Carmelo Anthony comparison because the back to the basket game and the strength in the post has definitely been a plus for this team. But a hat tip to Tobias as he continues to pursue the 50, 40, 90 club. We'll have to keep our eye, of course he will be, on how he does that next season. And the playoffs is what will matter the most because no one cares about 50, 40, 90 if he doesn't show up there. But for Noah Levick, I'm Danny Pommells. Thank you for listening to the Sixers Talk podcast. We will join you with a guest in our next podcast to kind of dissect some of this playoff experience, excitement, I should say. And as the Sixers pursue the NBA title, we will come to you after we know who they're playing, who their first round opponent is after the play-in tournament. So check us out thereafter. Friday is what we're targeting. So we will see you then. For Noah Levick, I'm Danny Pommells and Ben Berry, our esteemed producer. Thank you for listening. Check out Noah's work on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. We will see you next time. Take care.